My name's Julia. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm on the team here at Books Are Magic. That's fun. Before we get started, I just want to point out a few logistics for how the night's going to run. We are going to be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the conversation, so start thinking of some questions to ask and then hang on to them. After the talk tonight, Ava will be signing and personalizing books at the desk near where you checked in, over there. We'll also have additional books available to purchase from my colleagues up at the register. And if you're joining us virtually on the live stream, welcome. We'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of Will They or Won't They online, and you can use the link in the live stream description to do so. All right, it is my pleasure tonight to introduce you all to Will They or Won't They. And let me start by saying that nobody, and I truly mean nobody, writes sexual tension like Ava Wilder. This book sizzles with chemistry. It's incredibly emotionally rich, and I found myself consuming it in much the same way I do my favorite TV shows, devouring it in a weekend and coming out of it obsessed with a new favorite ship. Lila and Shane are truly such incredible characters, and I really loved how Ava perfectly captures the lives of celebrities treading the line between public and private. I fell in love with this book, and I'm really excited to be celebrating it with all of you here tonight. Ava Wilder is... Ava Wilder is the author of How to Fake It in Hollywood, and of course, Will They or Won't They? She lives in Oklahoma City with her husband and their toothless cat. And Ava tonight is joined in conversation by Alexandria Bellefleur. Alexandria is a best-selling and award-winning author of swoony contemporary romance, often featuring lovable grumps and the sunshine characters who bring them to their knees. Her debut novel, Written in the Stars, was a 2021 Lambda Literary Award winner. So without further ado, let's all give a very, very warm welcome to Ava and Alexandria.
I'm super excited to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandria. Ava, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the book?
Sure. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Yeah, I was not expecting to have to talk about myself. That was really a curveball.
That's what everything starts with, always.
I currently live in Oklahoma City, as I mentioned in my bio, but I have a lot of roots in New York City. I lived here for most of my 20s, and I really wanted to do a New York event for this book because there were a lot of people that I love who I didn't get to celebrate with for the first book, so I'm super happy to be here tonight.
Well, I'm super excited to be here too. I love the book so much. Yeah, the chemistry was off the charts. I binged it in a day. I was on deadline when I read it. And so it was like my little treat to myself each night when I, finished writing. I felt like I was like kind of cheating by reading it when I was on deadline. So you should, feel proud of that.
That's also how I feel when I'm working on something. Like I'm cheating with other books if I read something else.
So, we're often asked as authors like what a book is about, but I feel like release days are a culmination of months and months and months and months of hard work. I always want to be asked about like what I'm proud about a book. What do you especially love about Will They or Won't They, and like what makes you really excited about this?
I'm proud that I finished it, first of all. It just, when I pitched this book to my editor, it was a very like sort of one paragraph, no details about anything, like no details about the show they were on. And so once I started to kind of develop it and build it out, it ended up being a much more complicated story than I anticipated with, there's multiple timelines. There is this TV show that they've been on for almost 10 years that I like had to know what happened on it. There's, this enemies to lovers dynamic that I wanted to feel very enemies at the beginning, but also
and
like...
it does. It's great. It's perfection.
But I wanted it to really feel earned and like to believe that they fall in love at the end. So there were all of these different things to balance, and it ended up being just like a really difficult writing process. So I'm just happy that it's finished.
It's interesting that, you talk about like juggling all those components because it flowed. It really flowed.
Thank you.
I just want to gush about this because like I know that we on the back end as authors see all that hard work. It's kind of like embroidery, you see like the messy like the stitches on the back, but like the readers don't. And I just want to like commend you for that because the dual timelines and when I opened it up and I saw that there was a prologue, I was like, oh, there's a prologue because that's kind of like not really a thing that a lot of authors do these days. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm in for a treat. Like if she's doing a prologue, like I was really excited just when I saw that. Like, oh.
And the prologue was something that did not come until like the very last draft after I had been revising with my editor for a while. So it's like it really was very, very worked and reworked. So it's good that that is not visible on the reader end.
It wasn't. It read seamlessly, and if you haven't read it yet, you really are in for a treat. Like it's the dual timeline was handled beautifully. So the tropes at the center of the book we've touched on are it's like strangers to, or it's kind of like strangers to lovers to enemies to lovers. And then there's some forced proximity with them being on the TV show together. It's a Hollywood set romance. There's also, it's a second chance kind of. What do you love about those tropes in particular? Any of them? Because it's just a, embarrassment of riches in terms of tropes. I call myself a trope slut because I can never pick like one trope that I love. And you managed to like put so many in there. There's like a one bed kind of moment. I just, you gotta pick like, what do you love about those tropes?
I think with all of them, what they all have in common is there's like a high capacity for drama. Mm-hmm. Like those are kind of the most dramatic tropes, like enemies to lovers, to hate someone, to nurse a grudge for years, like that is a choice that you have to make. Second chance, I had trouble when I was writing it because all of my exes are dead to me forever. So I was like, how am I gonna, I don't even believe that this is possible. And celebrities, big drama, like Lila especially, they're just like grown-up theater kids, so it's like everyone is being super messy all the time. I think that's what they all have in common.
And I love that you didn't shy away from the enemies aspect. Like, I sometimes want to call it antagonists to lovers instead of enemies to lovers. I feel like enemies really thrives in the fantasy space where you've got like a dagger against someone's throat, So I'm really hesitant to ever call a contemporary romance enemies to lovers. But in this one, I was like, there was a metaphorical like dagger against like each other's throats, especially like Lila to Shane, like throughout most of the book. I like that you didn't shy away from that. Was that like a concern of yours writing it?
Oh, absolutely. And I had seen a lot of that discourse with people being like, there's no such thing as real enemies to lovers in contemporary, and I was like, challenge accepted. But it turns out a lot of people don't like that.
A lot of people don't have taste.
So, it's truly like you can't please anybody. You can't please everybody. But yeah, and so getting into it, I was kind of like, there really is a level of immaturity in enemies to lovers, and you kind of just have to embrace it. And I kind of got around that by having it be like, they were so young when they got together that they're kind of like stuck in this level of immaturity, even though they've like matured in other ways in their relationship with each other. There's just like this kind of regression to, they relate to each other in a way that is like I'm not endorsing that, you should feel that way about someone, but it worked for them.
It really did work for them. It did. Speaking of tropes, is there a trope that you haven't written yet that you're just dying to?
For my next book, I don't want to spoil it, but I am working in a new trope that I'm very excited about, but I don't want to reveal.
Very exciting. Okay, well, I'll just, beg your publisher for an arc of that when it's ready. Is there a trope that's a total nope for you, conversely?
I have been realizing that I'm not really like a trope-based reader. Like I love tropes, but it's more about like I'm more of like a voice reader. Like there are certain authors, even if they did a trope that I was like, ugh, I would still read it and probably love it. Like I think there's a good execution and a bad execution of every trope out there.
Very true. Very true. We kind of talked a little bit about like juggling certain aspects, you know, dual timelines, so on and so forth. Was there anything that was particularly challenging and then particularly rewarding about writing this book? Especially since, you know, a sophomore novel kind of thing, you know, that in and of itself poses a lot of, you know, challenges.
Yeah. All of the stuff involving the show was like incredibly painful for me to come up with. Like I had, you know, because I did not know what kind of show it was going to be. I literally was like in my notes app, like businesses merging. Like I'm glad that was not what it was about. You know, it's like she's the head of they're heads of rival companies and they have to like merge their businesses together and they hate each other but they fall in love. Like that would not have been a good show to base this around. And just like, you know, it's been on for so many years and there's like, you know, who are the supporting characters, who are like the supporting and like who plays them and what's their relationship with everybody else and all of that stuff. Every time I had to like write a scene involving the show, I was just like, why did I do this? And I actually ended up taking away some of the details. Like I had too much detail about the show and my editor was like, I don't think we need all of this. And I was like, you're right, we don't.
Speaking of that, now that you have, you know, 2 books set in the world of Hollywood, what kind of research went into, you know, setting your books in that world?
So I have just always been like a huge pop culture fan and very, you know, sort of since from a young age, kind of absorbing everything I could about that world. And for this specifically, I have a friend who I believe is here tonight who, who has worked on shows like Intangible for years. And I was constantly texting her all of these like really weird specific questions because I didn't want to make it too like just like totally off, but it was also like I also didn't let her read it until it came out because I was afraid that she was gonna be like, this would never happen and I would have to like redo everything.
That's great that you kind of had, you know, a primary source to,
Yes.
you know, draw from. But yeah, I agree. I probably wouldn't have let my friend read that either. I would have been like, no, hand wavy,
Yeah.
you know, this works in a romance novel. So was there like a show or actors or something that particularly like inspired, you know, the book? Kind of the relationship maybe between Lila and Shane?
Yes, I pulled from like many different sources because actors are just like constantly hooking up with each other and causing drama. The one specific inspiration that I have not had a chance to talk about yet and nobody has really picked up on is actually the Twilight movies. For a couple of reasons. One, like thinking about the character of Lila and someone like Kristen Stewart, who I think like was not necessarily like prepared for the level of like superstardom that she achieved, and people really like treated her like shit because she, you know, kind of had like a closed off, anxious demeanor, and people were like, she never smiles, and like, what's wrong with you? And like, she's literally 18 years old. And also, like, the relationship, you know, it's not a TV show, but like, they were working on those movies for like 6 or 7 years, and basically what's the length of a TV
Huge
show.
time in their lives, yeah.
And I know that a lot of people like to be like, that relationship was PR, but like, it always made sense to me that, you know, you're spending so much time together, like either filming or doing promo, and like, you're going through this like absolutely insane thing that like nobody else really understands and is probably like super alienating to the other people in your life. Like, it totally makes sense that you would like develop feelings for each other.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's like, you know, we all think about roommates being the forced proximity, but I feel like workplace romances, especially with a TV show, I mean, your trailers are right next to each other. That's a big forced proximity thing, and that I love forced proximity, and so that was like, you know, scratching my id kind of.
Especially if you're like specifically cast because you have insane chemistry with each other.
Oh
like,
yeah, like starting that with that chemistry read, like amazing choice, and just like starting like the chemistry right off the bat, I loved it. Speaking of that chemistry read, like you did a really great job of depicting their like physicality. Do you have like face casts, like actors that you kind of picture for them? Like if this were turned into a movie, like who would you like be your dream cast for Lila and Shane?
I have people that I like thought of, like people who I sort of gave when I was like getting fan art done, but I wouldn't necessarily cast them in the movie. Like I never have a satisfying answer to this. And also like because I'm writing about actors, I don't necessarily like want to name people because I don't want to make it weird, and I also like want people to be able to kind of picture whoever they want to picture.
I get that. I have a bad problem where I always think of models instead of actors, and I'm like, well, they probably can't act, so no.
I definitely will sometimes get like random Pinterest models. It's like you're from like a French catalog. It's like, who are you?
But that's great because you did a really great job of describing them, but I could, kind of insert my own, ideas. Did you do any particularly interesting Googling while you were writing? Like any like out there wild, I know like horror writers and like thriller writers, like they're known for their like, the FBI is going to be like looking at me, but did you do anything that, your FBI person would be like, oh my God, what was she Googling? Like what was she thinking?
I don't know if there was anything really crazy. I was definitely doing a lot of like, top 10 like co-stars who couldn't stand each other to get some ideas, or like, Airbnbs, Vancouver, like would they only have one bed? Like
in a romance novel, always. Without spoilers, did you have a favorite moment or scene?
This like the thing I did like about writing this book is that it's so focused on the two of them. Like almost every chapter is like the two of them alone together, and that's like always my favorite stuff to write, is just them talking and kind of that tension. And I love the like Vancouver sequence. I love the New Year's scene between the two of them. I think the only scene that like didn't have any major edits was the second sex scene. That one was what it was.
I am going to share a few of my favorite moments without spoilers, just lightly. So with the intimacy coordinator, I really loved that. Did you do any research around like intimacy coordinators? I know that it's kind of been talked about a little bit more with Bridgerton being out there, that it wasn't even something that was on my radar until I think I watched Bridgerton season 1 and they were talking about it. Did you have to dive into that, like the role of that?
I did, yeah, I did some research and was trying to sort of see like what kind of questions they would be asking, what their role is. And that was something that sort of comes up with them throughout the book, is it's sort of the two of them and like a third party mediator, like getting sort of trying to make things work between them. So that was kind of one of those situations. But yeah, it was interesting, and it is a way, like, I think there's like a lot of complaints about, there's sort of like a backlash against intimacy coordinators now, which kind of sucks, but like
it does,
yeah. It felt like an interesting way, because they still really hated each other at that point, and you don't want to make like the readers feel uncomfortable with anything that's happening. So I felt like it was a good way to kind of make sure, like, you can still keep the tension really high, but like everyone is sort of okay with what's happening, or they're not okay with what's happening, but they're as okay
they're
as they're
on
gonna
board.
be. Yeah.
Speaking of a third party mediator, it's great that you said that, because another one of my favorite scenes, kind of throughout the book, is they go to therapy together. I don't think that's like a spoiler, I hope not. They're not together, but they go to couples therapy. Was that like a plan you had from the very beginning, that they were gonna be like going to couples therapy to like discuss their relationship, non-relationship?
That was something I had sort of drafted the first few chapters and was kind of settling into like their dynamic, and I was like, I feel like I kind of wrote myself into a corner where they really hate each other, and I don't think they're going to be able to get out of this by themselves. So they kind of, there needs to be a professional helping them. And I thought it was like a funny idea to be like, sent to couples therapy with your coworker. But I was like, is this too silly? And then I found out in my research of co-stars that hate each other that the co-stars of Castle, the show, also had to go to couples therapy. So it really is like, when you're writing about actors, the most dramatic option is usually true.
I really loved it though, because even when they weren't together, you were seeing the progression of, as if they were a couple.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really healthy way of portraying, especially because they are such enemies. It still maintained a very open dialogue, healthy component that sold the HEA for me. So kudos for that. I want to see more therapy in romances, and I thought that was a really clever way of including it in such a fraught trope. There's another moment. I'm gonna keep it really vague. There's a not really a prank, I guess, but there's a moment where Lila thinks about mayonnaise on an ex's car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna I don't want to spoil this. Was there you can say as much as you want about the scene. Was there real life inspiration for this?
No, I don't even remember where I heard this, but it was someone talking about how that is a really good way to vandalize someone's car that is not keying it or anything, because mayonnaise actually really fucks up the varnish. I don't know. I'm not a car person. I don't even remember what I said, but then it kind of gets in the upholstery. Just dump a big thing of mayonnaise on a hot day, and they're gonna be in trouble.
I'm not a car person either, but it reminded me of when I was in high school. We pranked. I was in theater. I was a theater kid, which was a nice tie-in. I felt that connection to Lila. We pranked some of the guys. We put suntan lotion on their car handles, and it took the paint off, and we didn't know that was going to happen. So it was a callback kind of moment for me.
Wow, I love that you have real life experience.
I did, yeah. It wasn't quite mayo. It was balloons on the tailpipe and suntan lotion and eggs. But do you have any real life prank moments?
No, I'm such a little nerd. No, I'm very afraid of getting in trouble.
Okay, I can respect that.
I have to live through my characters.
It's a good way to live vicariously. You don't get in trouble. You just get.
I get in trouble with reviewers,
which is sometimes worse. Was there any other fun research you did outside of Hollywood or anything outside of the Airbnbs with his past career experience as a bartender? I'm always curious about bartender knowledge. I know nothing about bartending.
That came from my husband, who was a former bartender, although I don't really get too in the weeds with his bartending experience.
Do you have any plans of revisiting this world? I don't want to give spoilers away if there's spoilers. You mentioned at one point in the book about maybe a spin-off of the show. Any potential there?
I think I have no plans to spin it off. I part of writing a book is so hard for me, and part of the thing that makes it enjoyable is starting pretty much from scratch and creating a whole new world. And I feel I'm very jealous of authors who are able to write these interconnected series, but I feel my brain just doesn't really work that way. I'm well, these guys, put them in the box, they're done.
I completely get
time
that.
to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I feel I needed a series Bible when I was working on a series. I feel a lot of people don't think about that in the contemporary space, but it can be really hard to juggle a lot of characters. Yeah. I loved so many of your characters in this book that I selfishly want to see more of them.
Well, I feel I would be writing their book, and I'd be well, I can't have this happen because I said this in the last book, and I think that
absolutely
would add to the frustration of drafting in a way that I don't need.
Are there any outside of Hollywood, any settings that really draw you in outside of LA, Hollywood? I'm always a nut for settings. I've set so many of my books in Seattle, and now living here I'm thinking about New York set books. But so is there anything that you're really excited to pursue?
Well, my next book is partially set in Las Vegas and partially set in a to be determined European destination. So
exciting.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. I visited Vegas for the first time for research, and and I was tough because I still haven't taken my honeymoon yet. So I've been trying to talk my husband into going to Europe and being able to write it off on our taxes. Book research.
I love that. That's a good plan. That's a really great plan. Vegas that's an exciting setting. I feel you don't see a whole lot of that in romance novels unless you're they just get married and then they go back to their regular lives. would you say that you're more of like a plotter, pantser, plotzer, in between? Like, what's your process like when you sit down to write something?
Definitely in between. I am not a good plotter. I'll start with the premise, which is, sort of a one line or one paragraph pitch, and then I'll start thinking about the characters and kind of who would be interesting playing off of each other, and what is like necessary for me to know based on whatever trope I'm using. And then usually I'll immediately think of like what sort of the big scenes are, and then as soon as I know what like the opening scene is, then I will start writing, and I'll be kind of like working towards those big scenes. But I definitely get surprised, especially in the second half of the book. I don't normally know what's going to happen in the second half when I start, but it's helpful. They're going to end up together.
That is, you have that one beat that
Yes.
it's going to end up happily.
Yes, so that's sort of the tiny light in the distance.
I commend you for that. I always freak out. If I didn't know what was happening in the second half of my book, I probably wouldn't get to the second half of my book. I would just be paralyzed with fear. So that's exciting though, that you kind of are along for the ride with your characters. When it comes to your characters, do you how much do you know about them really though when you sit down? Do you know we talk a lot about fears and wounds and goals and motivations and those big terms, but are you someone that knows what kind of socks they wear? Do you know those details?
No.
Okay.
But they do usually, when they come up in the book, they will surprise me that I will know, but I don't come up with that stuff in advance. I usually will sort of have kind of a brief biography of what in their life has led them to this point, what they want or what they think they want and what they actually want. And then, usually, and what their fear is, all that kind of stuff. More like emotional work versus the specific details. Those will come in later.
I'm so impressed that you're like a plotter. I'm a real plotter. I'm
I'm
really
impressed.
type A.
I'm
about
very
it.
impressed by that. I really wish that I could do that.
It's just so interesting whenever I talk to another writer who's so different than I am, because I said, I would just be paralyzed in fear. And like I said earlier, with the back of the embroidery, I feel it's really messy on the back end, and I feel if I didn't plot, mine would be messy on the front end too. So I just I'm really impressed, and I commend you for that, because it was just such a smooth, amazing read. I loved it so much, and it was super steamy. When you think about writing the chemistry between your characters and choosing how much on page action there's gonna be, do you let the relationship dictate that, or do you kind of know going in?
Yes, it is based on the couple and kind of what and the development of their specific relationship, because I knew for them I wanted to show them the difference between them having sex when they hated each other and then when they had accepted that they were in love with each other, and kind of how that is different. And I think I'm not someone who's the sex scenes always have to serve the story, but I feel my books end up kind of overstuffed, so it sort of has to be that way, because there's I gotta tie up all the other stuff, so there can't be too much extraneous sex in there, even though sometimes I'd like there to be.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And
No,
I don't
absolutely
want
not.
to spoil a moment, but there was one line that I loved so much, I highlighted it, where she says to Shane, will you still...
Wait, I want to say my dad is here right now.
Well, they're no longer enemies, but basically she asks him, will you still, you hate me? I think you can fill in that blank. I'll try to keep it a little PG-13. I really like that line. So, if you haven't read this yet, get excited. I highlighted it. I'm just waiting for all the Kindle highlights to show up on that. That's gonna be a thing. So just wait for that. Look for that. I'm calling it now. Are there any books that you've read recently that you are really excited about, or maybe they're not out yet and you're excited to read them?
Have you read You Again by Kate Goldbeck?
I have not.
It's so good. It's coming out. There's actually a bunch of really good books coming out on my birthday, which is September 12th. So there's
It's birthday presents
exactly,
for you.
Yes. There's You Again by Kate Goldbeck. Thank You for Sharing by Rachel Runyon Katz.
I did read that one and I loved
The Name
it.
Drop by Susan Lee, which is a YA book.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are all I can think of, but it's like so many amazing books coming out just for me.
I just always love to ask that because I feel like romance writers have the best romance recommendations because we're readers first and foremost. So I will definitely add the ones that I don't know of to my list, my ever-growing TBR pile. So what are you working on next that you can kind of lightly say?
So I am working on my third book. I guess I already revealed where it is set.
Right.
It is a little bit of a departure from my first two books. It's kind of like, I think it has like thriller elements to it. I'm having a lot of fun working on it. I'm very terrified. But I think it's going to be good, and I'm really excited. I'm excited to see how it goes. As you know, I don't know what's going to happen. I had to come up with a synopsis because it's my option book, and there's a lot of like, well, I don't know what's going to happen here yet, but like, you know, it's going to be fine. So
Okay, well, I'm already gonna ask for a copy of that now.
You got it.
Okay. All right. So I think, do we want to turn it over to some audience questions? Is anybody in the audience? Yeah.
Hi. If you had to pick like a song for this book and also How to Fake It in Hollywood, do you have like a song that you would go to sum it up or like give you the feels for it?
Yes, I have. I'm very into making book playlists to capture the vibe while I'm like drafting and thinking about it. I think for this one it'd probably be Silver Springs by Fleetwood Mac. And,
My heart.
and for the first one, I guess these are both classic rock songs, but Handle with Care by the Traveling Wilburys.
Another question? Okay.
What got you into writing? And then with both your books, they're both kind of celebrity based. Or did you always know you were gonna write celebrity books when you started?
Yes. I was very into writing growing up, and I had sort of let go of that dream in my 20s. And then when the pandemic hit, I just started binge reading romance, like I think a lot of us did. And after a few months, I was like, I think maybe I'm gonna try writing one. And I knew I didn't want it to be like anything that had happened to me for several reasons. And it felt like, you know, I was like so into pop culture. I was like, I feel like this is something that I could write about where I wouldn't be, like, I felt like if I had to do too much research, I would be like, well, I don't want to do this. Like, this is too hard. So this was something that I felt like I could just write it and feel like I kind of knew what I was talking about.
So for those who couldn't hear, how do you structure your writing day?
My writing habits are so bad that I feel bad answering this, but basically, if I'm working on a book, I'll go to my day job and then I'll come home and sit on the couch for the rest of the day, and hopefully will have written something by the time I go to sleep.
That's a solid plan. Other questions?
If you could have your characters interact with any characters from other books, not ones that you specifically like love, like I love this character, I want to see them interact, but more like who would you love, like who would you feel like, let's say, Ethan, this would be a really fun scene if he was with this person specifically, with any or all of your characters.
Well, whenever I read a celebrity romance novel, I'm always thinking about like if they would get along with my characters. I feel like You Had Me at Ola by Alexis Daria, Jasmine and Ashton. Who else? Oh, The Astronaut and the Star by Jen Comfort. Yeah, I think any celebrity romance novel, I'm always like, let's get all these people together, get them all in a movie or something.
I like that idea. Yeah.
So what is your dream cast for the book? Not just Lila and Shane, but like as many of the cast as you, like who would you cast as everybody?
I don't know. Like I don't have a dream cast. I feel like the only like 5'11" redhead actress is Karen Gillan. So She would probably have to be Lila. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm interested in hearing what other people think about that.
I've written a redhead, so I'm extra interested in this also. For selfish reasons, I want to see more actresses that are redheads cast in things in Hollywood, so yeah.
This is kind of a question for both of you, but how do you guys get over writer's block?
Honestly, most of the time I will just like set a timer for 20 minutes and just like write whatever garbage like I have to write, because normally when I have writer's block it's because like I know what I have to write but I just don't want to for whatever reason. Like the scenes with all the stuff with the show, or it's like if I'm writing a scene that has like 10 people in it and I don't want to deal with that, like I will just set a timer, give myself permission for it to be terrible, and like usually it ends up not being that bad when I go back and read it after. So like starting is always the hardest part for me.
I have a few methods. One, having deadlines that aren't self-imposed is a big, kick in the pants. I have to turn it in to my publisher, so I just have to push through. I go on a lot of walks. I sit in my shower and I cry. I listen to music. Most of the time when I have writer's block, it's because I've written it wrong, like the scene preceding what I'm working on. So I need to go back and reread what I wrote and fix it somehow. Sometimes it is a matter of time. But yeah, those deadlines that aren't self-imposed just really help.
I agree with all of those.
Yeah.
Walks, it sucks, but physical exercise really does help.
It's so bad when the things that are good for you actually work.
It's terrible.
The worst.
You've kind of written about movie stars and TV stars. Which do you think is like a better format to adapting books to screen?
Ooh, well, I've actually found out that, like, as them being like subjects, or the
story.
I see what you're saying. I think having more time that you get with TV, you can have sort of like, you can have more depth to the characters, which I think is harder to do, especially like condensing a book into a movie. You're always going to lose things and the pacing is going to be weird. I feel like TV is a better format for books because you can really kind of like, you really get in there.
Yeah, for both of you, just a fun one. Who were some of your first celebrity crushes?
Jeez. I had a crush on David Boreanaz and
I was gonna say
Spears.
Spike.
Yeah, now I'm a Spike girl, but back then it was definitely Angel for me. Rick O'Connell in The Mummy and Evie in The Mummy. The entire cast of The Mummy was like my sexual awakening.
I would say Spike from Buffy and Angelina Jolie in the Tomb Raider movies.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So I'm an audiobook guy and was happy to listen to the first book. And I'm a couple chapters into the second book. And it's really cool that you have both male and female voice actors. I'm just curious what is involved in that process to pick out the voice actors, and if you are part of that process, happy with the process, if it's a concern or how that works.
I am part of the process, and they've been very great about letting me have input. And for the first book, they actually initially were like, we're just going to have a woman narrate the whole thing. And I was like, I kind of want this to be like a dual narrator. And they'll usually send me some options, but they've let me be like, because I've gotten more into audiobooks lately, and I came in and was like, well, what about, this person? They were like, great, sounds good. So they have been, they've been great.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
You get that much input. That's amazing. I love that. Yeah.
Hi.
Since you write so much about celebrities, what are some pop culture moments of this rent-free?
So for those who couldn't hear, what pop culture moments are living rent-free?
Well, the first thing that popped up was Adele Dazeem. I watch that regularly. It's still really good. I'm gonna go with Adele Dazeem.
That's crazy. That was real.
Solid.
That was a really good answer.
Other questions? Yeah.
Which couple from your books is your favorite?
This one took me so much longer to write, so I was like with them for longer, and they were so difficult for me that I really have a soft spot for Lila and Shane.
So do I. Other questions?
Sorry, me again. You had mentioned that you had like had a dream of writing and like set it aside, and then in the pandemic you like came back to it. When you came back to writing, was it like with the intention of like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna complete the dream, I'm gonna be published, or was it more like, we'll dive in, dip a toe, make it a hobby again, see where that leads?
Yeah, well, I had never really done like fiction writing. I was more like, I thought maybe I would do like TV or film writing or maybe like essay writing. So I had never even considered that publishing a book was like an option for me. And then none of those things had really felt right. And like, as soon as I started How to Fake It, I was like, oh, maybe this is like what my voice is for, is like this genre and this medium. And mostly I was just focused on finishing it, and then I was like, I'll see what happens, like maybe nothing, and I'll like put it in a drawer and move to the next thing. But thankfully that didn't happen.
Definitely, thankfully. Other questions?
I know you said a lot of the time your books are overstuffed before you edit them down. Are there favorite details from this book that were lost in editing?
There was like a whole plot line with a supporting character that had to go. I don't know if I feel like there are spoilers involved. I don't know if I want to go into it, but there was mostly the supporting characters really got cut down with this book because I didn't want to sacrifice any of the Lila and Shane stuff, but originally there was a lot more of them. And I was like, I guess that's not why people are reading this book, is to have like a 15-page brunch scene with her friends.
Well, I want to read that 15-page brunch scene.
I'll send you the director's cut.
Do you, working off of that actually, do you like save everything you cut? Like I save everything like in a scraps folder to maybe use at one point. Do you save your stuff for like future projects?
It depends. For that was like one of the last rounds of editing with my editor. She was like, you need to cut 12,000 words or whatever. So that was like, I had the previous draft, so I was like, I can go back and pull whatever this is if I need it. But actually in my very last draft, I ended up pulling something from the very first draft that like hadn't been in there since then. So I don't necessarily like purposely save it, but I am sort of like thinking about what is and isn't in there and whether I can kind of reappropriate it for something else.
It's always good. Any other? Yeah.
This isn't really a question, more of a comment, but I feel like you have such an emotional weight in your characters, like the first book and the second book. And I just want to say, like, I really appreciated like Lila's like anxiety representation that you had in this book, as well as like Shane's like lack of confidence, even though he's like appears really confident. Hopefully, I didn't spoil anything, but I just like loved that like emotional weight for both the characters and their growth, as well as like their relationship growth.
Thank you so much.
Other questions?
So you've done like to Hollywood. Have you thought about like stepping into like the world of music, like rock stars or a band or?
Well, I actually had a different version of my second book, like a totally different premise, characters, that was a musician book, and I never could get it to work. I would love to do a musician book, but for some reason they just don't agree with me. Maybe one day, but and I think it's also because I don't want to write lyrics that appear in a book. Like with writing about actors, you can be like, wow, they're amazing at acting, and it's like you just kind of have to like believe that. I don't want to publish any lyrics.
I agree. Like for myself, I wouldn't want to do lyrics because I'm not a lyricist. I'm not a poet. It's kind of the same thing about writing characters that are funnier than I am. Like trying to make them funny. Like, can't you just believe that they're funny?
Yeah.
It's like they're just funny. I promise.
I had, when I was working on my musician book, I had like a bit with my husband where he was like, well, maybe every time someone is about to like say her lyrics, like they get interrupted.
Okay, well, see, now you're funnier than I am because I'm not. Any other questions? All right. Well, where can everybody find you on social media? As long as the platforms
I
don't
know.
die.
I know. Sign up for my newsletter. I'm on Instagram. I guess I'm on Threads now. At Ava Wilder Writes. That is my only social media platform now.
Awesome. Well, everyone, buy the book. It's amazing. Hey.
Just gonna pop back in here for one moment. Thank you all again for coming tonight, and thank you both for such a wonderful conversation. As I mentioned earlier, Ava's gonna be signing over there where my colleague Christina is waving her hands. We do ask that when you line up there, you take your belongings with you so our staff can start to break down this space. And that's all I've got. Have a great night, and thank you again.